Dr. Miller's Hershey, Pennsylvania event was very memorable for many of us. And those of you, how many did attend that? You remember that we explored the significance of Rene Canton's ocean minerals and trace elements as one of the most foundational, if not the most foundational nutrients in human physiology. And many of you have become interested in this, and we had quite a high level of curiosity at our booth where we are showing the Rene Canton ocean minerals and trace elements. And this is a product that I brought to America after discovering it in Brazil in 2004. And the rest has been quite a success story because I speak on the clinical use of this product all over the world, and now it's become a global product. And it's in its, 125th year of production. So it's has quite an established reputation. Today, my colleague Victor and I are really thrilled to present a little known but most startling discovery in health science. It concerns a prevalent waterborne toxin that hides in plain sight and can compromise all life, plant and animal, and we call it deuterium. May I ask, before this event, and perhaps even before you saw that someone was going to be speaking about deuterium, how many of you heard of and knew what deuterium was? Okay, that's, like Dr. Mercola said, this is a brainiac group, okay? But I would say 9.5 out of 10 doctors that I meet in conferences and so on basically say, I heard of that word, and it sounds radioactive, which it isn't. And they go, but I really don't know what it is. And Victor and I were probably very well versed in deuterium, probably by the time we were both about 8 or 9. And as a result of that, I named my Cub Scout patrol the Atom Patrol. So you can see where my head was at early on. This topic is going to throw you a curve. It's thrown me a curve after 50 years of study of water science and especially water contaminants. I thought there wasn't much to learn except some new chemical. But this one is water. So the most unassailable, most reliable, most perfect nutrient also contains the most health-compromising toxin to all life, called deuterium. And it's thrown me a curve. So proceed slowly in your understanding of this new discovery, and proceed even slower in your possible application of it in your life and the health and wellness of your patients. Victor, if you want to comment, please feel free. Victor and I had to go to Russia together, and we're going again in a very short time, and we'll explain why at the end, to really meet the people who were involved in this discovery for the last 70 years. And you'll learn that this discovery was a discovery without an explanation for that period of time. And only recently, excuse me?
The good news is, by the end of this lecture, you guys will all be experts in this application.
Okay. Can you guys see my desktop?
Yes.
Horrors, oh dear. Does that look the right thing? Okay. So, this is about, the end game of this is about deuterium depleted water. This is probably the best solution to the problem you're about to get acquainted with. And it's referred to in the industry as DDW. It's very limited in its supply, and a lot isn't known about all the things it's capable of. So here's what Victor and I really have concluded, and this is to me a curve. Deuterium depletion, meaning the act thereof, of the body of any living thing, including plants, may be the most important health and medical discovery of our time. You will see, it'll be interesting to hear your own conclusions here as you proceed with this conference. But this is, all of you are smart enough, you're going to realize this is it and how was it missed.
So the first thing we have to do is understand what deuterium is. I'll go to the next slide.
So, periodic table of the elements. The first element, hydrogen, the first element to be made in the proverbial Big Bang. Shortly thereafter, neutrons combined with the hydrogen atom, which consists of a proton and an electron. The neutron joined the nucleus with the proton and formed a heavier form of hydrogen known as deuterium. Sometime later, that deuterium largely transformed into helium. So helium and hydrogen are the two most prevalent elements in the universe. And it was possible that all of the deuterium could have turned into helium, but it didn't due to prevailing thermodynamic conditions, and we are now stuck with deuterium in our world. And then more neutrons entered the scene and joined into the ordinary hydrogen nucleus, and we have something called tritium. It is a radioactive isotope, so there's 3 isotopes of hydrogen, and all are within this element of hydrogen. So many of the elements have several isotopes, and the difference between them is just the number of neutrons in the nucleus. And this oxygen has 4 isotopes because of the differing number of neutrons in the nucleus.
The significance of deuterium is that it's the only isotope that has double the mass of its main constituent, hydrogen. So you see why this is so significant.
This is significant. This is a significant, and I use this and no one forgets this. Maybe you part your brains out and you wake up 2 or 3 pounds heavier than you know. Okay? But imagining waking up one day and you're twice as heavy. Okay? That's how significant this is. When an atom within one element, an isotope, is twice as heavy as the primary isotope. So for your information, you'll see that the primary isotope that we've always just called H, hydrogen, H2O, really is called protium. That first isotope, simple hydrogen, is protium, and then when you add the neutron, you get deuterium. So twice as heavy ended up being a bigger deal than anyone could have imagined. So here we have the protium, and this is some of the nomenclature, and it shows that there's 1 proton, 1 electron, and deuterium has a proton, a neutron with an electron. And the proton and neutron are basically the same mass, and therefore the deuterium is twice as big. What does that do? That means that water is no longer really H2O. Water consists and I say this with a little bit of reservation, 3 distinct molecules. One molecule is what we thought water always was, H2O. And we didn't even know that H is different isotopes, but one of the molecules is 2 atoms of protium and 1 atom of oxygen, H2O, ordinary H2O. But if an atom of protium and an atom of deuterium combine with oxygen, you have a new molecule that looks and acts and tastes just like water. And we call that heavy water, HDO, if we use the symbol D for deuterium. Okay? And it's a little bit heavier. Not twice as heavy because you have the oxygen involved now. It's maybe, the molecule itself is maybe 6 to 8% heavier than the H2O. And then we can have 2 deuterium atoms combined with oxygen and form another 3rd type of water molecule, and that's also called heavy water. We use this, there's a little bit of inconsistency in the science. Some people refer to the HDO. Do we have it up there?
Yeah.
Oh, it's okay. The HDO is sometimes called semi-heavy water. You will see this in the literature. But we're referring it in this as heavy water just because it contains the heavy isotope of hydrogen. So Victor might want to comment on the 3rd isotope. It's an esoteric thing because there's hardly any tritium in the planet and it's mostly a contaminant.
1 out of every 41 million hydrogen atoms is tritium. So it's very rare. There's more of it now in the atmosphere because of all the atomic testing that's been done in the last century, but it's very rare. This is primarily something that's only made in the lab, and you can buy it. You can go to Sigma Aldrich and buy heavy water there for lab experiments and so forth. It's used in the atomic industry. It's used in nuclear bombs and so forth. But this is naturally occurring. It's very rare. So primarily what we have is 99.9% protium, and the rest is deuterium.
And so deuterium, that works out. Deuterium is, in nature, there's about 1 deuterium for every 6,600 protium atoms. Okay? 1 in 6,600. And that number will become very important to your understanding of the seriousness of this. Victor happens to be a kind of historian, expert about certain sciences, and he has run with the football on the history of deuterium and in science. So I'm going to let him present the next several slides.
It's a fascinating history because it's so new and how this was discovered. So right around the time in the 50s that Crick and Watson were discovering the double helix of the DNA, a gerontologist in Siberia was trying to figure out why their particular populations in Siberia had 6.5 times more centenarians than everywhere else. So after a few years of research, they concluded it must be the water that they're drinking. Everything else was the same. In fact, people ate the same diet all over the Soviet Union. In fact, in Siberia, it's a much harsher environment. So why are these people living longer with less disease? And so he honed in on the glacial meltwater. Figured that was it. So a few more years of study and figured out that it was deuterium that was reduced. Now, it was reduced by 15% from normal, more normal levels that you find, which is about 150 parts per million. So that really started this whole thing on. So what happened then is the Soviet Union allowed in 1966 them to publish in English, the University of Tomsk, and reveal this discovery to the world. And after that, they kind of put a lid on it, and it wasn't really brought up again until after the Soviet Union fell. But because they had opened up to the world, Americans started getting involved, and there was a lot of research being done on it, but as Robert said, it was discovery that had no explanation. So So without an explanation, it was just observed, and it wasn't really emphasized in the scientific community as something that was a profound discovery. That happened a little later. So basically what was so amazing about this is that it wasn't that long before the discovery of these Yakutians and Alteans that somebody won the Nobel Prize. Urey was a scientist that won the Nobel Prize for discovering deuterium. No one had thought it existed. At first they thought hydrogen was just hydrogen. They didn't know it had an isotope. So by 1934, it was discovered in 1931. By 1934, he had won the Nobel Prize for it, and this had started off basically the atomic age. So very significant. In fact, if you consider the 20th century as the century of heavy water, we can consider the 21st century to be the century of light water.
So deuterium first got the attention of scientists. I'm just going to poke in because as a result of the quantum physicist Heisenberg or Einstein, etc., they realized that this heavy water was very valuable to be able to make a nuclear reactor. Not having anything to do with radioactivity, etc., but because of its extra neutron, it was the perfect neutron moderator to be used in the cooling water and water that is around a reactor. And the fascination was that the scientists were telling the military, if you can make a reactor, you can make this thing called an atomic bomb. And Japan, United States, and Germany, and England entered into a race to who could make and concentrate this heavy water to be the first to make a reactor. And Hitler was being told that Hitler, all he wanted to do was to blow up London. That was his fascination. And his scientists told him that a bomb the size of a pineapple could take out in one shot all of London. And the pursuit was on. It was a whole second war that was parallel to the military war we know of. And there's a fascinating film that you can see, I think it's on Netflix or something, they're called The Heavy Water Wars. And it's a Norwegian film, absolutely excellent. And it will give you insight into how much a role deuterium played.
I actually wrote a history, a brief history, which we don't really have time to tell you the whole thing, but if you come by the booth after, I can share that with you. One interesting study I found was a longevity study that showed some of these people in Russia exhibited extreme longevity. You have ages of 139, 150, 165 years. There's one guy, 195. Is this real? Is it not? Who knows? It's taken off the Russian census. But what these people had in common is they all live in these mountain areas consuming glacial meltwater. So, as you can see, this is part of the reason this is so exciting is because it's so new. 1931, deuterium was discovered, and then by 1971, the Americans had copied the Russian findings, had done their own investigations, concluded that deuterium-depleted water does increase the growth of plants, does increase longevity of animals, and so the first conference on deuterium depletion was held in 1999, and then 2001, there's quite a pivotal book that a researcher by the name of Shimlai in Hungary wrote, where he spent 8 years investigating 1,200 cancer patients and giving them light water and or DDW and stuff, and seeing the effect on that. And that book is readily available on Amazon. But it wasn't until the year 2007 that actually somebody discovered and wrote how deuterium actually damages our mitochondria. Like I said, this was a discovery without an explanation. So that explanation came in 2007 by a researcher by the name of Dr. Abdullah Algun from Turkey. And he basically said what we're going to show you. So that's what it's about.
Several people are claiming to be the messenger for how deuterium acts in the body and the cells. But we kind of independently discovered this virtually unknown researcher who is a total brainiac in Turkey, of all places. And when you see in some of the subsequent slides what he found out and how difficult it must have been, it's quite an amazing experience.
It's a Nobel Prize-worthy discovery, and we'll have the pleasure of being with him next month.
So once deuterium enters the cell and becomes accessible to energy-generating mitochondria, it may function as an isotopic. Isotopic meaning it's an isotope. And this word isotopic is going to be in your world. There's a whole branch of science, medical science, called isotopic science is unfolding. So, but this deuterium functions as an isotopic toxin. And we are at a toxin discovering conference here, and we thought, wow, what a place to talk. We're the first group that's qualified to even comprehend our presentation, okay? So I applaud you for this, and you can carry this on to the degree that it interests you. So this toxin is simply fatal to the inner mechanisms of the electron transport chain, which most of you have heard of in the mitochondria. So we consider it the water paradox because most of the deuterium you are exposed to, but not exclusively by any means, is from water. I mean, it's a big part of your body. It's a big part of what your intake is. But if you really remember or copy anything, it's this statement: water, the most essential and revered nutrient for life, also conceals a little recognized harmful toxin known as deuterium. And how that got by everybody, especially myself and my colleagues, I cannot explain it. It's so ubiquitous compared to the toxins we normally think of, mercury and lead and so on. And this is in everything. Even the most knowledgeable health and medical professionals have just discovered this serious but little recognized health risk. As long as aqueous liquids and hydrogen-bearing foods are consumed, deuterium continuously and systematically damages mitochondrial ATP mechanisms. And you eventually will be at a net loss of mitochondria, the things that are the most essential to your life, because they affect virtually everything. They are the energy producers, as you know. And now you have something that is every second of your life is damaging them and eliminating them. When the body has a high deuterium burden, every aspect of performance, health, and longevity suffers. Many people are talking about this effect of the loss of mitochondria due to deuterium as a major explanation of aging. And it may become a new definition of aging.
This was first proposed in 1973, by the way.
Exactly. So there's only 6 drops of heavy water. Heavy water would be the HDO molecule and the D2O molecule in every liter of water. And that's all it takes. Because there are billions of deuterium atoms in this, and it doesn't take a lot. It only takes one to take down what you're about to see in the mitochondria.
That's probably the reason why it was overlooked. 6 drops. Heavy water, semi-heavy water, and water. What's the big deal, right?
So just to impress it upon you, every human from birth to death is compromised in their mitochondrial energy production by the ubiquitous presence of deuterium. Every glass you drink, it's going to completely change how we look at hydration. Okay? It's not going to be drink as much water as you can and all that. It's going to be very different. The more water you drink, the more deuterium you're exposed to. So, if we think of energy, and you compare a 9-year-old to a 90-year-old, it's an apparent major thing that distinguishes them. And primarily, it's the result of the mitochondrial loss as a result of deuterium in water.
So when deuterium was first discovered, they wanted to know how different it was from regular water, what possible biological benefit or detriment it might have. So when they concentrated it to 30%, again, this is not something that occurs in nature, but 30% heavy water, when fed to algae, plants, mice, they all died. Mice died on the 5th day, consuming 30% D2O. So they found that even though it looks like water, tastes like water, it's not quite water.
If anyone hands you a glass of water to drink, and the ice cubes are sitting on the bottom, this is something you want to avoid. Because heavy water ice cubes sink to the bottom. So, I think it's great spy material, Ready?
Next slide.
So, and this, anything with mitochondria is influenced by deuterium, plant and animal.
This just shows you how water is not just water. It's actually, when you consider not only the hydrogen isotopes, you take the oxygen isotopes, you see that there's quite many different water-type molecules in a glass of water, not just H2O. That's all.
So, it are the isotopes of oxygen, which now you have many molecular types that make up water. So
63 combinations.
this fascination is what's leading to the isotopic new sciences, because they're going, oh my God, there's this isotope, this has this effect on little known organelles in the body and processes in the cell. So deuterium is present on all water, in all water on Earth, and probably the universe. All seawater is about 155 ppm. It's a little less at the poles due to meteorological differences, and a little more at the equator. All tap water, well water, spring water, artesian water, 150 parts per million. That's 150 deuterium atoms for every 1 million regular hydrogen protein atoms. Okay? And it's the standard. All distilled, reverse osmosis, bottled, purified, deionized, whatever you can throw at processing it, nothing changes it. 150 parts per million. And people bring us things that, I have special water, it came from this place. It's got to be lower in deuterium. People want it to be lower in deuterium so badly. But it's pretty much all water. It's 150. All prepared beverages, soft drinks, energy drinks, about 150. All fresh and prepared fruit, vegetable juices, 150 to 155. But if you have a vegetable juice that is made from above ground vegetables such as leafy green vegetables, broccoli, and so on, there is a process in nature that does repartition deuterium, and this can be slightly lower in deuterium. Okay? Leafy green and above ground vegetables are slightly lower in deuterium.
All plants and animals have a strategy for depleting deuterium.
Yes. It's something that probably started in evolution, and the amount of deuterium wasn't, as you'll learn, was not constant in the human lifespan. Himalayan glacial melt water. This is, many of you remember the Hunzas, and the Hunzas are one of the most studied cultures on Earth for their longevity and long life. And it is known that their water is 133 parts per million. So it's not a great, but a significant depletion in deuterium in their water. And when it seems, or from the evidence, when you are exposed to this water from birth, and your mother's milk is deuterium depleted, the yak milk is deuterium depleted, the yak butter is deuterium depleted, the plants are growing in deuterium depleted water for your whole life, and you don't know anything about the science of it, it appears that this has incredible benefits to not only a disease-free health, but a lifespan that's in the 130 to 150 range. Siberian glacier meltwater, that inspired the discovery of the Russians in 125. But the mystery of all is why Antarctica, the snow and the glacial water on Antarctica is as low as 89 ppm. Okay?
And 10 to 20% reduction is actually quite significant because the effect is proportional to the square concentration.
So, I don't know, for those of you conspiracy theorists like me, I don't know if this is why generals and presidents are visiting Antarctica in the last 2 years. I don't know if the ETs have a concession for deuterium-depleted water down there. And I don't know why it's so difficult to go down there and visit it. But when I went to Sacramento State to look at and be trained in the use of an advanced deuterium analyzer, a stable isotope analyzer, the professor there, whom I spent the day with, said, oh yeah, Antarctica, I go to Antarctica to take samples of coral and seawater and all this. And she goes, and when I told her what we're discovering, she goes, you know what? Like in the mess hall, in the cafeteria, you always hear conversations that, hey, you know, when I came down here for my 6-month stint in Antarctica, I used to have this, but I don't have it anymore. And this was typical conversation. She didn't put 2 and 2 together, but it left a marked impression upon me. So deuterium, that is in food, water, the ocean, and so on, has not been constant. It was significantly less, and not a lot is known about this, but it was significantly less when there was an ice age. And when the ice age receded about 11,000 years ago, it seems to have released a lot of deuterium into our environment. And we are now inherited something that maybe was once 100 or 120, and now is 150. And it's overtaxed our ability to handle it. We didn't evolve into it and learn how to deal with it. Another aspect is it's reported, some people, that a meteoric event, an asteroid, something also hit Earth and delivered a lot of deuterium at some point. I don't remember how many millennia ago. Do you recall that?
Well, 12,000 years ago. But the significant thing about this is that when you look at the deuterium in the planets of our solar system, they are significantly less than ours. But when you compare our planet to the deuterium concentration of comets, it's very similar, which is support for the theory that water on our planet comes from meteoric bombardment.
So you see this showing the receding, this little graphic illustration, receding ice age, which ended up dropping a lot of deuterium into our environment.
So remember we talked about it's only 6 drops in a liter of water. Why does 6 drops matter? Because it's only 6 drops. Well, this is why. Because our cells are primarily made of water, molecularly. You see that we have 3 to 5 times more deuterium in our blood than glucose, potassium, magnesium, calcium. So this is why this is really significant. We have too much of it in our blood, and our goal is to reduce it. In fact, this is what our body is trying to do every moment we're alive. We have a strategy for deuterium depletion. And some of the things that we can do that we'll mention will help you in your deuterium depletion strategy.
This is just another review of the incidence of deuterium in the world. Equatorial water, 155. Tap water in Los Angeles, 150. Thawed, snowy water from the Himalayas, 135. Water from the Greenland, 125. And I think the United States just was trying to buy Greenland. I wonder if that has anything.
You see these two anomalies here, which are really, really significant. You see in the Himalayan region, and then you see in the Antarctic region, how they're more reduced than anywhere else. We don't know why. That just happens to be the case. So, again, this is very fascinating because the understanding of how deuterium affects our cells wasn't discovered until 2007, actually the explanation of it. But leading up to that, you see that the mitochondria was only discovered in 1890. So it's only very recently that we're understanding how the energy mechanics of our bodies work. ATP wasn't discovered until 1929, Krebs cycle not until 1937, and it wasn't until the 60s that Boyer, what was his name, discovered the electron transport chain. And the electron transport chain is where the damage is done in the ATP synthase nanomotor. Excellent.
So the mitochondria evolved and expected to just run on protein, which basically supplied the proton into the second membrane layer of the mitochondria to enter into the ADP synthase nanomotor and be processed into ATP. And it wasn't expecting deuterium to enter, and we're going to find out when it did enter what it does. It's quite remarkable. Think of waking up and finding you're twice as heavy. That's the closest explanation.
So if you zoom in all the way to the mitochondria and you go into past the cristae into the electron transport chain, and you see the final step in the electron transport chain is this ATP synthase nanomotor. It's called a nanomotor because that's what it looks like and that's what it functions like. It rotates at 9,000 RPM. It has a rotor and a stator, and it actually generates a magnetic field that attracts oxygen to bind with the protons from the hydrogen to create water. So it's a very complex machine running at near 100% efficiency, which no motor that we can make can do. So it's very complex, but it also is very simple. It's very simple in the sense that it only has a space, a receptor, for a proton, not a neutron. And so the way this nanomotor spins, just to give a brief explanation, is there's a proton gradient. There's an intermembrane space, and there's protons on one side and protons on the other. The differential between the two causes they want to maintain an equilibrium, so the protons get shuffled into the ATP synthase nanomotor, and they produce ATP by the turning of this ATP synthase nanomotor, and this is called proton motive force. So if we can,
We will, but hold on to this thought at the end. There are 10, because it's a little premature right now, but there are 10 to 60 million ATPs produced per cell with a rate of about 1,500 to 10,000 deuterium disruptions. You don't know what that is yet, but 10 to 15,000, 1,500 to 10,000 deuterium disruptions of the nanomotor per second, every second of your life. Okay? And you're going to see what that disruption really is. So we're going to give you this little partial may not, can we bring up the sound?
So basically every 15 seconds, your nanomotors get hit by this extra neutron called a deuteron. Deuterium has the extra electron. When it's a proton and neutron together, it's called a deuteron. And so this wonderful little video is going to illustrate what actually happens.
It's quite, this was startling to me to think there is something in the membrane, submicroscopic, spinning like a turbo in a Porsche at 9,000 RPM. And it's completely fabricated of biological material. And it's taking in protons and
Creating ATP.
And this would be like, for those of you here who understand what a Porsche turbo is, it would be like throwing like some nails into the turbo, okay? And the problems would begin. So
ATP synthase is a molecular machine that works like a turbine to convert the energy stored in a proton gradient into chemical energy stored in the bond energy of ATP. The flow of protons down their electrochemical gradient drives a rotor that lies in the membrane. It is thought that protons flow through an entry open to one side of the membrane and bind to rotor subunits. Only protonated subunits can then rotate into the membrane, away from the static channel assembly. Once the protonated subunits have completed an almost full circle and have returned to the static subunits, an exit channel allows them to leave to the other side of the membrane. In this way, the energy stored in the proton gradient is converted into mechanical rotational energy.
Wow. So you see those little receptor sites for protons? So 1 out of every 15,000, which is about every 15 seconds, comes a proton with an extra neutron. Where we said it was twice the weight. So it's like kissing your significant other, and then 1 out of every 15,000 times, you get an elbow to the face.
So that nanomotor cannot survive one or several experiences with the deuteron from the deuterium in water and your food. And it crashes and it destroys that nanomotor by the tens of thousands every day. And you begin to lose the ability to maintain your mitochondria. And think of that as one of the most aging of all processes in the body. We're going to talk very lightly about, there's a serious gravity about talking about the effect of deuterium at the therapeutic level. It is profound. It will become one of the most profound things in the next 10 years of what this discovery is capable of resolving. So we are going to go very lightly in what has been done with this. I've already been the fall guy and had the FDA with suspend importation of ketone, okay, for 2 years. And this is, ketone cubed. So we're going to go lightly, and you might want to hear all the cool things that are being done with deuterium depleted water. But we're going to have a great reservation about this. So after 60 decades of research, the conclusion is deuterium damages, restricts, and degenerates most biological systems.
So the first time it was proposed that actually deuterium affected DNA was in 1973 at a conference at Argonne National Laboratory. And this was the first American-based research, but Eastern Europeans have been publishing on it for quite some time on this. And as you can see, there's a number of studies. In fact, if you go online, you'll find all of them. But what is fascinating is that if you consider that we have our human genomes consists of 3 billion base pairs of DNA. So that for every 300 base pairs, there's 1 deuterium. So what happens if you have more than 1 or a few? Well, being twice as heavy, it starts to distort the shape of DNA. If the DNA is distorted too much, it cannot properly replicate, so you have senescence and apoptosis. And this was the very first thought that came into the scientific community, that perhaps this thing is distorting of all enzyme molecules and DNA simply because it'll take a position that's normally occupied by hydrogen, but it will be twice as heavy, so that way it distorts these molecules, especially stereoisomers. And stereoisomers are like butterfly wings, they're very identical, and they exhibit chirality, which is, so if you take a plane and you have one wing that's heavier than the other, it won't fly properly, right? So this is what happens with stereoisomer molecules. And this was first predicted by Griffiths in 1974. But the reason took so much time to get to where we're at is because there was no process for creating Litewater that people could really study until much later. As you can see here, simple explanation. You see all the hydrogens that are possible. So 1 out of every 300 of them in this base pair is going to be a deuterium atom. So as you can see, if you have too much of these deuterium atoms, cumulatively, you will distort the shape of this DNA and it won't replicate.
All the physiology textbooks and cellular biology textbooks just forgot to mention that all those hydrogens they had in all of their diagrams could really be occupied by deuterium, and something that has fatal effects in cellular biology. This is a book that I suggest all of you buy who seem to be interested in this new discovery, and it's available on Amazon for $12.50. And this is written by Gabor Shamlai. Yeah, you have to be Russian to pronounce it right. And it's a remarkable, simple book that discusses his decade-plus long experience with the effects of this, especially in the realm of cancer patients. Shown for the first time is a bottle of the deuterium-depleted water that we have in our booth, and is really the mainstay of our introducing it to the market. This next slide is just a curve showing that the accumulation of DNA errors, of which deuterium plays a significant role, is an exponential function as we age. So it obviously has to be looked at with respect to deuterium as one of the antagonists in this.
In fact, if you look at this logarithmic curve and consider that if somebody makes it to 100 years old, the chances of a centenarian making it another 10 years to 110 are roughly 1 in 700. Interesting study. There's a lot of studies out there. This was one of the more interesting ones because it took data that already existed. Basically, all the municipal water sources in the United States are tested for deuterium content, and this study shows a direct correlation of that to depression and serotonin-related mechanisms.
The intake of deuterium-depleted water also has astounding effects in performance, especially athletic performance. And this curve, I'll just tell you what it really means. It means that with the use of deuterium-depleted water, your body goes to another level of metabolism in which you expend much less energy to achieve the same physiological output.
And where this is manifest is in the Himalayas. So when people climb Mount Everest, they need supplemental oxygen. However, the Sherpas that live there do not. So they can climb all the way to 28,000 feet without any oxygen. And this is because they consume this glacial meltwater, which is reduced in deuterium. And it has been proven in these studies that deuterium actually improves hypoxic condition. So you can do the same amount of work with half the amount of oxygen.
Deuterium-depleted water will no doubt change sports forever. You'll learn in the next couple of slides what is going on in that area, but for those of you who are basketball fans, LeBron James doctor told me that LeBron James has been on deuterium-depleted water for 5 years now. This is just a simple result of a study showing that light water, the ability to change your output of physical work compared to controlled water. Would you like to take the alternate biohack?
Absolutely.
One of the wonderful blogs that came out by Luke Story, and it was titled "The Ultimate Biohack You Never Heard of," and now you're hearing of it, okay? And it's an excellent piece if you get that.
So the body's always trying to deplete deuterium, and the ideal is about 120 ppm or below. I consider if you make it below 130, it's also quite good. So that strategy involves consuming deuterium-depleted water, but that's not the only thing. What you have to do is you have to also eliminate all beverages from your diet that may be high in deuterium. Because if you keep putting deuterium-depleted water in and drinking other beverages like a 6-pack of beer at night, it's just going to go back up. So a ketogenic diet, fasting, the end game of both of these dietary strategies is deuterium depletion. Okay, this is what people haven't quite realized yet, why they're on the ketogenic diet and why they fast.
It all has a singularity. Ketogenic diet, red light therapy, all this feeds into the reduction of deuterium in the body.
Ketones, fats have less deuterium than carbohydrates. Fasting, for every 2.4 pounds of fat burn, you produce 1 liter of metabolic water. All the metabolic water that we make in our cells is deuterium depleted to about 50 or 60 parts per million. So these become adjunct strategies along with drinking deuterium depleted water to deplete us down to where we want to be at 120.
We're just going to show this slide.
Absolutely.
That keto has great benefits in more efficient production of ATP. So this slide we're only showing, we don't have time to go through it, but one of the masters of the reduction of deuterium is the camel, enabling him to have near super animal traits like being able to walk 100 miles without drinking water. What he's doing is he's creating his own metabolic water from the fat that is in his humps. And that's his, he got there a little faster than we did. People, of course, are exploring the deuterium-depleted water, actually topically as well for beauty. It seems to have a very quick improvement of skin in almost all the people that we have personally had experience with. Is there a problem, though, with all that we have told you? Yes, there is a problem. And the problem is that it is very difficult to make this water and very expensive, okay? There is no conventional purification method that can do it. There is a hydrologic cycle engine in which some cases, meteorological conditions, freezing, rain, etc., are just perfectly matched, and it tends to deplete deuterium a small amount. That's what the mountainous people have benefited from, what the Sherpas have benefited from. But as far as actually producing it for a population, there's only enough deuterium made in the world right now, after 20 years, for 10,000 people. Okay?
There's no standard filtration technology that will remove deuterium. I've tried to find it in the last 15 years. It doesn't exist. Sometime in the next 20 or 30 years, I hope somebody will invent something that will be a home unit. That will be the equivalent of Edison inventing the light bulb, because it will change our paradigm of health forever.
You will find it curious that the only independently owned deuterium depletion plant is owned by the King of Saudi Arabia.
Who personally did something.
So this is how it's made. It's made in something called a vacuum fractional distillation rectification process. Okay, it's very complicated, very detailed. It has to be run with great precision, and each one of those columns there, running 24 hours a day, is only able to produce 15 liters of this in 24 hours. So you can understand how painstaking a process it is. Testing for deuterium, we are ready to receive our stable isotope deuterium analyzer, and we will be able to test people's saliva for the level of deuterium they are at, and should they embark upon a deuterium-depleted water program, they can see how their progress is. There has been, some of you may already know that doctors and departments at UCLA have combined with some European resources and formed the Center for Deuterium Depletion in West Los Angeles. Okay, it's something they've taken very serious. They know where it's going. They're smart, and you can go on their website just by looking up Center for Deuterium Depletion.
I just wanted to add that other than the spectrographic analyzer for testing deuterium, you can also customize a magnetic resonance instrument, MRI machine, to also image stable isotopes. And this has been done, and it's quite interesting where deuterium actually concentrates in the body when we look at the MRI.
And where does it concentrate, Victor?
In tumors.
So, Litewater that we have in our booth is the most deuterium-depleted water process in the world. It's reduced by 94 to 97%. You don't use it straight, you do dilute it with other water and for a program that suits you. And this is something I think it's really important to see. This, you won't understand this, but we have this chart at our booth too. So if you were to just try to get down to 120 parts per million, you might take any one of them. You could take 119 parts per million, and on the right-hand column, you can see the cost of this at retail, at the retail price of most deuterium-depleted waters. Okay? So you see it at one level. If you just go very easy, it's like a visit to Starbucks. And if you're really aggressive and have to get down quickly for other health reasons, it can be an expensive undertaking. So it takes you, if we had 100